I like the music a lot. That's all I've got to say. This is an afternoon session. I know we're all a little tired, and we're going to do some data. But it's going to be really fun data. We call this smoke and mirrors because a lot of times we look at our data, and we look at pieces of data, and we say, I know what's going on. I see this piece of data. But then you go through the season, and you're like, wow, I wonder why that didn't really work, what I did. And it's because we're not looking at a full picture of data. And so I'm going to talk about some of the biases that we have with our data. Starting with Mark Twain, who I thought really had it down pat. There are 3 kinds of lies. There's lies, there's damned lies, and there's statistics. And there is data that goes right with that. So I am the co-founder of LSI Tool Software. I've been in the business about 18 years. My family's in the vacation rental business. I'm a North Carolina real estate BIC. I've had my own real estate company since 2007. I am an amateur photographer, so I love photography. So we're just looking at a statistic here. 9 out of 1, that should be 10, sorry. 9 out of 10 dentists recommend Crest, or at least they recommend brushing your teeth with toothpaste. So I mean, it's however you want to read a statistic. There are common misconceptions with data. This says deception. It really should say misinformation, because sometimes we have misinformation and it misleads with our statistics. There's inaccurate data. Certain types of data are more inherently inaccurate than others. They miss pieces, they duplicate. Some of those I've put here. Crawled data is huge. We used to crawl data in the Outer Banks when we first started doing e-commerce websites. And we noticed that the data was okay. You know, we could do some things with it. We could do more than we could without it. But it was inherently inaccurate. And misinterpretation is the biggest culprit. And that's what we were talking about with smoke and mirrors. Seeing the data and thinking it says one thing when in reality it says another. So we're going to look at this company. This is real data from a real company. And we're going to look at some stats here. So this first one we're looking at, the first box on the right, is the paid occupancy. So as far as paid occupancy, they have 74.2%. The local market has 70.4%, so they're doing pretty good. Anytime you see a green arrow there, it means, hey, I'm doing pretty well. So we've got green arrows across here. Off market, they've got less off market. Look at that. They're at 13.6. The market's at 14.4. So they're doing something right. The availability, they have less availability than anybody else. So they're doing great there as well. So all in all, if you saw these stats, what would you think? I'm doing okay, right? So we're going to go to the revenue per paid room. This is Rev PPU. It's probably my favorite stat. I think it is it's a great stat. So for their paid per unit, they've got like $200 more that they're making per unit. And if you go per available unit, they're still making more. It's a little more there. That looks good. That looks good. And now I'm going to look at my Rev PPR. That's per room. So it wouldn't matter if they were a vacation luxury company that have 7 bedrooms, and we're comparing against the market to other companies that maybe aren't luxury and have, you know, mostly 3-bedroom beach boxes in this case. The per room is really going to see, this is where the rubber meets the road. This is my favorite stat that I see, because it's the great equalizer. It normalizes the data. So pay attention to this stat when you have it. And then we're going to look at available room. We're on par. So overall, buddy, I think we're doing pretty well. Now we're looking at our average booking window. Average booking window, we're at 184 days out, and the market books at 181. That means I'm booking further out. I'm doing better. And now I'm looking at the average daily rate. The average daily rate, look at that. I'm getting more. So that's great too. And then I'm looking at the average length of stay. Average length of stay in this market is 7.4 days. It means mostly this is a weekly market. It is usually a Saturday to Saturday, Sunday to Sunday turn. They've got 7 days that they're putting that together. I'm at 7.1, and they're at 7.4. I still look at that and I'm going, wow, I'm doing good. Keeping in mind, this is the average of the local market. There are companies that are doing better than this. This is the average. So we're going to take just one of those. So I think we're doing great. I look at that. I go to my manager. I say, look at this. We're doing great. The only place that we're down is a little bit in our average daily rate, right? We're a little off there. And our average book of stay. right? We're not getting quite as many 2-week stays or longer. What does that mean in revenue? Well, all right, here come the statistics. Here comes the calculations, all right? Just so let's stay together if we can. The demo company takes about 10,000 reservations a year. The average length of stay we saw was 7.1. The average, this is in the Outer Banks, obviously, they just put it up there, so now we know that's in the Outer Banks. So the average length of stay for the local market is 7.4 days. That's the average. The average daily rate for our demo company is $624.30. When you multiply that out by the average number of days, that's the average for the market. The average days the local market is getting is 74,000 days across their units, okay? This is based on this particular company. If you go down and you look at all your stats here, and you look at the performance difference, we're missing 3,000 days. Not a big deal if you think about it that way, until you realize that it's $624.30 on average per day, and that comes out to 1.8 million. Now, combined commission and fees. Okay, we can't just say commission, we have to do fees because of the market. We're looking almost at $500,000 in lost revenue. But I thought we were doing good. I saw all those stats. It looked like we were doing great. Well, you are, but you're comparing yourself to the average part of the market. So there are people that are doing much better than you. It means you just have to pay attention. Now, how much would that be worth to you for a free product to see that? That's pretty, you could make a little bit of money paying attention to that, couldn't you? What can I do in this case? What if my average length of stay is less? Well, there's a lot of things you can do. Here are just some ideas. You could have your reservationist call if there's a cancellation and say, hey, we have an opening. You want to come in a day early or you want to stay a day late? Focus on longer term stays. Automate an email that goes out that says that if there are open days, and we actually do this. There are people that do this as well. If there's no occupancy on the days before the guest comes in, an email goes out and says, hey, you want to come in and stay a day early? The same thing if there's nobody coming in. Now, this goes out within 2 weeks, or like probably 8 days or so. So, depending on your market. The reason that this company is doing 7.1 is because they have a policy. And that policy is we only do seven-day stays. Makes it easy for us. We can do all kinds of stuff. But it's costing them $500,000 or so. Now, we're going to go back to the revenue per paid room. This was the other place that they were down. And look, it's only $7. That's $7 per paid room, okay? That's per room. That's why the stats are really important. This negative $7, when you look at what it is actually, you've got 10,000 reservations for this company. They have 600 homes. The average number of bedrooms is 3.8. So see, they're not averaging 7 bedrooms after all. They're averaging 3.8. The average number of reservations per home is 18.5. Average length of stay is 7.1 days. So the average difference from the local market for the rate, that's $7. In annual revenue, that's over $500,000. Paying attention to the stats that actually matter and knowing what that can do for your business is very, very powerful. I'm listening to the guys up here talk about the year over year and the type of stats they actually pay attention to. And those stats are available in that free product we were talking about. So those type of stats are available. And I mean, I think that as revenue managers, it's really important that we recognize the fact that just that $7 difference per bedroom is costing $524,000, right? So we're going to talk this together. Those two stats are almost $1 million. Now that's not gross, guys. That's net. So that's how much comes into your pocket as a property manager in this particular case. So it's money, it's paying attention to what's happening in the market. It's because we looked at that and we said, in all these other areas, we're doing better than the average. That doesn't mean we're doing the best, it means we're doing better than average. And in these other little 2 areas, we're doing not quite as well as we did in those. So I think that paying attention to all the details we know is important, and in this case, it's $1 million important. And that's what I wanted to go through. Smoke and mirrors. I want to say one thing before I go. The guy that's coming behind me, Jack Newkirk, he is one of the brightest minds in this industry. And I am really grateful to share this stage with him today for this.
Thank you, Lynell, and hope we see you back on stage for the Q&A. And by the way, I love your shoes.
Thank you. They're very comfortable.
Excellent. So there's a lot of food for thought. Not easy. But before you go and change all your pricing policies and everything else and your cancellation policies, now we see the second half from our smoke and mirrors session. Now, Jack has received already a great introduction by Lynell, so there's nothing I have to say. Please join me in welcoming Jack Newkirk.
Hi.
Jack, we're so happy to have you, but I have a question for you as well.
Yeah.
Before we kick in with your presentation, I'm a bit confused with your title. What does a territory systems consultant do?
Well, you know, we consult systems and territories. We actually changed my title.
I'm a lot smarter now.
Yeah,
Thank you, Jack.
I appreciate that. Lynell, I'll get you that $20 bill later on. Thank you so very much. Thank you all for being here, and I don't want to take up the entire time just kind of preaching at you or reading off statistics. Not to say that the statistics aren't valuable, but what I do want to do is make sure that we, as we go through this, that you pay attention to what is it that we can potentially answer for you in that Q&A at the end to bring this around and make it, after all, relevant to your business, because that's what we're here to learn about. So in my presentation, what I decided to focus on, very similarly to Lynell, was how can you actually make the wrong decision based on the information that's presented, as opposed to just missing that key bit of data that you were looking for. So I've got a couple of different examples, one of which is actually provided by Amy Highnote. So I don't know if this is an ambush for you, Amy, but I'm going to reference one of your recent articles from VRM Intel. But first, really quickly, I'll give you an introduction in a moment. We'll talk about some current trends and kind of where the economy is headed. I do want to address a couple of different, what I'll call, I don't know, key examples or stories, if you want to. One about ADR in the Outer Banks, and another one about a pay-per-click campaign analysis from one of our clients in Idaho. Not a vacation rental client, so they were okay with us sharing their data with you. And then kind of talk about, you know, what's the now what of it. So there's three things that I try to do every time I coach one of my clients, is to talk about the, you know, what's going on. So what does that mean for your business? And then now, what do you do about it? So what, now what? That's the now what that we're going to get to. And then, of course, a Q&A. First things first, I've been working in international hotels and vacation rentals in Australia and Belize and Bolivia and the United States for about 14 years. And with that, I actually wound up landing a gig at a little hotel in Bend, Oregon called the Oxford Hotel. So it had 59 rooms and an average daily rate of $839, which was fun. And when I took over the helm of that hotel, it was the number 17 hotel in the United States, and we were able to, on TripAdvisor, and we were able to work that up till it was the number 3 in the country, and then I left. And now it's number 22. Totally not my fault. I had a great team there, but it was a really fun experience working with some extremely high-end clientele, a lot of performing acts that came through our little town in Oregon, in Bend, and gave me a unique insight there. Now I work for exclusively vacation rentals for my company, which is called NAVIS. So if you are a NAVIS client, I think I've probably seen most of you so far here today, and if you're not a NAVIS client, of course, you can come visit with us afterwards, and I'd like to talk to you about what we do. But this is not a product showcase for NAVIS. Just want to be very clear about that. Lastly, I do have 2 dogs. I don't think I have any kids. I have a wonderful wife named Jennifer, and I love to race motorcycles. So that's a little bit personal about me. Let's get right into it. Economic outlook for the United States right now, pretty much every single economist out there agrees that while we're not going to see a recession or a downturn in this calendar year, we mostly agree that by 2020, mid or Q3 of 2020, we should start to see a little bit of a correction in the market, especially going into an election year. So with all of that in mind, it's not a question of if, but really when that recession comes. But we're all riding this ADR wave right now, and that's really our first case study, if you want to do that, which comes from Amy Highnote's recent article in VRM Intel about those 5 markets, the increase in ADR and the downturn in occupancy that we addressed. We're going to look at those and kind of overlay that on what we think the outcome of this upcoming recession would be. Specifically, some of the, just for your own edification, some of the indicators that we look for when, and I'm sorry that the gray text at the bottom is not coming out very clearly, some of the indicators that we look for when you kind of predict or anticipate a recession is some spikes in things like retail spending or industrial production or extremely low numbers when it comes to the unemployment rate. Historically, these trends have precipitated a recession for the last 40 years or so. So we are aware of that because all of those things are happening right now. And there are some causes for that, like the trade war with China, and price of oil is pretty low right now. There's that stock market fire sale back in late 2018, and so on and so forth. So all of these things combined lead us to believe that really we're looking at a shift, the needle being moved toward the market balancing itself out and then perhaps taking a downturn. So how do you prepare for that, especially in light of this data right here that was shared to us courtesy of Amy Highnote? So raise your hand if you read that article on VRM Intel about ADR in those 5 markets. Okay, it's about a third of the room or so. If you haven't read it, I strongly encourage you to go read it. It's on the website. It was written up in partnership with Key Data Dashboard, and they looked at really these 5 markets right here: Gulf Coast of Alabama, the Florida Panhandle, the Outer Banks, South Carolina beaches, and then Sevier County, Tennessee, Gatlinburg/Pigeon Forge. What they noticed in all of those, you can see, is that ADR is up, and this is just looking at the month of July, year over year, this year over last year. And you can see in every single one of these markets, ADR is up, and so everyone was excited. But in every single one of them also, occupancy was down. And I'm sorry, again, that it's hard to get the black text on the red boxes there. One of the things that immediately stood out to me upon reading that article is like, oh, we need to extrapolate this out to our new favorite term, which is RevPAR. And when you actually do the data based on a fictitious 250-unit company, every single one of those markets, except for Alabama, was down in RevPAR year over year. So not a reason to be excited. And even Alabama, you'll notice, $3.34 in RevPAR up. That's only 1.2%. That doesn't even keep up with inflation. I'm just going to let that kind of hang over you for a little bit. Driving ADR is what we want to do, but there is a threshold at which you will reach a saturation point, and your guests say, nah, no thanks. And they're just going to leave. And they're going to book with somebody else that has a more palatable ADR. Not to say that we can't drive it, but we need to have confidence and a good understanding of the science behind what people will tolerate and what we need to change. So based on this information alone, if all you had was visibility into what was actually booked, you may come to the conclusion that we need to soften up ADR. Otherwise, we're going to have this RevPAR dip again next year. Am I right? Thank you, Lynell. Thank you so much for agreeing with me. What I decided to do at this point is take one of these markets and evaluate a set of our clients in that market, which is the Outer Banks, and see whether or not what we call the rate resistance or turn down reporting was in line with this narrative. I've been talking a lot with Rochelle Hobbs about this today at our table. If you have 100 people who inquire and 30 of them book, those other 70 that decide to go stay somewhere else, it is critical that you understand why they chose to go someplace else. We call this unconstrained demand tracking. Why are people saying no? Because if you can get fewer people to say no, then you have more reservations. So what we decided to do is I aggregated a few different clients out of the Outer Banks, and I ran what's called a nightly lead demand report through our tool. And so every single inquiry for this particular set of clients that comes in over the phones, over OTAs, over their own website, or through email, it all generates a lead. And then all of those leads that get closed out without reservations, there has to be a reason for why they did not stay. And rate resistance is one of them. So if you look at this data right here, and again, I apologize if the black on orange is hard to read, you can see that rate resistance as a percentage varying month by month for the month of July. And let me back up and clarify something. This report shows all inquiries from July of 18 for July of 19. All inquiries from August of 18 for July. So every single one of these, all of these people are inquiring for the same month, but we're leading up in the previous year to check in. So across the board, they had about 12.6% rate resistance, which is actually in line with what you want as a revenue manager, especially in a highly seasonal market like the Outer Banks, where you can get, what, $8,400 for a particular home. So without further visibility, if I'm the revenue manager for these companies, and I'm looking at the market overall from what we read from Amy's article, balancing it against my 13% rate resistance, I may be tempted to lower my rates, especially knowing that these clients average out to about a $606 ADR on a market average of 540 or so. So they're above rate on average, but they're not seeing rate resistance. So what are we missing? Well, by the way, here's your curve. That is the appropriate rate resistance curve from inquiry to check-in. You do want to see that rate resistance increase as you get closer and closer and closer, because that's when you have the power to drive rate, because people like me forget to make reservations, and then my wife gets angry, and then I pay more money. So that's just the way it works. What I want to draw attention to is that bottom line. It's the nights lost other. So there's every other reason why these clients lost reservations is included in that. And so I wanted to pick at it, and so I went ahead and ran those numbers. And what I found was that it's not rate resistance where they're losing money, it's their deposit and cancellation policy. You guys see this? The deposit and cancellation policy is 22.6% of their total incoming reservations say, you know what? I don't want to give you a 75% down payment. I don't want a 90-day cancellation policy. I'm a millennial. I like to travel spur of the moment, and I don't want to pay everything down right now because I'm a millennial and I can't afford toothpaste or whatever it is. So for them in particular, if you extrapolate this out over an entire year, they lost about 1.7 million due to rate resistance, which, by the way, they don't want every guest staying with them. Not every guest is your guest, right? But they lost over 3 million in policy issues. I can't, unless I'm, Vacasa/Wyndham and I have 1,500 units in the market, I can't control what the market will bear in terms of rate. But I can certainly control what my policies are. And identifying what the underlying cause of this issue was here is critical to not fading on rate when you can simply adjust a policy, keep your rates where they are, be a market leader, and drive home more revenue. Questions about this data before we move on? Yes, Maslin. 4. Yeah, good question. All right, let's move on to the next set. So after I did, and by the way, there's your actual curve right there. You can see the orange line is the policy turndowns as opposed to the blue line, which is your rate resistance. So it was the bigger issue. But presented with only half of the picture, I could have made a poor business choice, lowered ADR, and overall continued to suffer in occupancy. Next up, what I did was I wanted to show you, for the marketers in the room, because I know that there are many of you here, what can you do in terms of a marketer to make sure that you spend money appropriately on PPC campaigns? This doesn't really have a lot to do with revenue management, but does have to do with understanding data. How am I on time, by the way? OK. So what I did is I pulled up a client in northern Idaho. It's called the Coeur d'Alene Resort, which is not vacation rental. And what I'm showing here is their PPC campaign analysis for the last 12 months. So I pulled out all of their campaigns that didn't produce any revenue and that they didn't spend any money on. And what I've parsed this down to is the data that you would probably be able to see if you were not a NAVIS client. Which is probably going to be things like if you have Google Ads or Google Analytics integrated into your website, you can see how many clicks you got on particular campaigns. You know how much you spent on them. You can probably see what your click-through rate is, and so on and so forth. But what is not visible to you, where's our laser? There we go. What is not visible to you is all of your offline booked revenue. So this client booked $135,000 through their own website on a budget of $37,600 in PPC. When you start to look at the individual campaigns, because we all want to decrease what we're spending on advertisement, I would immediately say, like, well, hang on a second. This Google search market terms exact, the first campaign, it only produced $1,800 in revenue, and it cost me $1,374. That's like 3 reservations, maybe, for an expense of $1,300. And I would be tempted out the gate as a marketer who wants to save money on PPC, kill that campaign. Would you agree with me? Please calm down a little bit. It's embarrassing. All right. And so on and so forth. I'll leave the data up here for a little bit. The way NAVIS integrates our clients' data is we also are able to carry your phone traffic for you. So what that means is if a person elects to call you instead of booking by clicking through onto your website, that phone call or that email inquiry or that engagement with an agent that's taking care of your booking process, that's not showing up right here. And I run the risk of losing all of that exposure that these campaigns would have generated if I kill what I think to be an underperforming campaign. So here's what the full report looks like. I'm so sorry for the contrast issues here. Can you guys read this okay? The orange, you cannot. All right. The orange, and hopefully we'll make these slides available to folks after the conference. I don't know if that's going to be a possibility. What this showcases, and I'll read it for you, that same campaign up at the top, that very first one, NAVIS is able to track those phone calls associated with it because we put unique toll-free numbers on every single one of your marketing campaigns. And that very first campaign actually drove 3,800 phone calls, of which 320 were people saying, I want to give you dollars, as opposed to those like, how's the weather in Coeur d'Alene? Of those, they booked 189 reservations and $105,590. So let me just bring this home. If I hadn't had this visibility into that campaign's performance of booking 105 grand over the phones, I would have killed it because $1,300 is a lot to pay for an $1,800 reservation. And I would have been out $100,000 because I would have killed that campaign. At the end of the day, you can actually see this client, they book almost 4 times as much over the phone as they do through their website. And this is just their PPC campaigns. Of course, they have all their organic as well. But at the end of the day, once you can actually see your account booked revenue by campaign, it becomes critical to understand I can't just go killing campaigns that don't produce any revenue in the online area, like this one, but it booked $2,175 over the phones, or this one that booked $2,000, or this one that booked 501. This one didn't book any, and it cost me $696. Kill that one, sure, but don't kill that top one. Is this kind of clear? Is everyone understanding this okay? So that's pretty much the gist of my 20 minutes that I have up here. But the idea behind this is with the right data, you can actually put in place some strategies. Without the right tools, it's more difficult. Like I said, this is not a NAVIS product showcase, so here are some things you can actually do if you want to start handling this a little bit better. First one is, for every single inquiry, you've got to work with your reservations managers and your reservations teams. This is where the bridge between data management and revenue management comes in, and start capturing those non-booking reasons. And don't let it be like some free-form thing where the agent scratch it down on a notepad. Be deliberate about this. Create a Google spreadsheet and actually have like drop-down items. The guest said no because my deposit policy. The guest said no because I don't have pet-friendly accommodations in this particular home. Begin tracking these things, and it'll give you a window into your unconstrained demand, and then you can make better choices. At the end of the day, if you're able to capture better data, then you can use that data through your marketing teams to drive more inquiries. With a highly trained team, you can convert more of those inquiries into reservations and then capture better data and so on and so forth. It's a circular cycle. But it is critical that that data entry be prioritized among your reservations teams and that it be clean, because garbage in, say it with me, garbage out. Second strategy today, by the way, so the first one is actually act on the strategy that you create. Strategy number 2 is when you're trying to increase your market share, there's really, revenue management to me is kind of a 4-legged table, and we've talked about this ad nauseum today, but having an understanding of what is my rate resistance, like we showed that 12.6%, what are my policy turn downs, things that I have under control, what is my availability turn down, right? If you're turning a lot of folks down for availability, that gives you a pretty good signal that you're not charging enough. Because rule number 1 of revenue management, if you're sold out all the time, you're not charging enough money, right? And then lastly, have an idea of what your unconstrained demand is. And in English, what unconstrained demand is very simple. If you had 1 million homes, how many of them could you fill based on your current demand? And if you could fill 260 of them, and you have 250 homes, I probably wouldn't waste the energy on getting another 150 unit company or all this other investment that we do. Reputation management is another big part of this, having a really active kind of pre-departure and post-departure survey and understanding of which kind of guests are most likely to come back to you, and then targeting those guests who have a high Net Promoter Score, NPS is what we call that. This is the best way to actually capture that sort of information, but do it before they leave, because those guests that give you a 5-star rating on Google, for every 10 of those, there's probably 100 people who are angry about some piddly little thing. And really when they're not angry about the thing is that they're angry that they didn't get to talk to you about the thing. Like when I get into an argument with my wife, it's not about what we're arguing about, it's about she thinks that I'm not listening, which is usually the truth or something like that. I can't remember what she said, I wasn't paying attention. But the whole point is with a pre-departure survey, you can get ahead of that potentially negative review and head it off at the pass, get it fixed, convert that 3 out of 5 guest into a 5 out of 5 guest, and now you have an evangelist for your brand. That'll help out. And then, of course, guest satisfaction management, making sure that you have an understanding of when your inquiries are coming in, both for new reservations as well as for housekeeping or maintenance issues and guest services related calls, and then actively following through on those things. These strategies combined can help you in a market where occupancy is starting to dip down. You have to prove that there's value to your increased ADR, and that value comes in how you make the guest feel. And without having the right information on that guest and being able to follow through with them in a timely fashion, there's no difference between you and a really expensive Motel 6 in the guest's mind. We know that's not the case, but the guest needs to be made to feel like a true guest, and these strategies will help with that. I am pretty much done. There's the recap. I think this is the Q&A section right here, and we have 10 minutes left, so it's perfect. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jack. Fantastic.
Thank you.
Lynell, do you want to come back up? So, questions. Any questions from the floor?
Yeah.
My question is for the NAVIS gentleman with the fancy title.
Yeah.
How do you expect, like, in this day and age where, like, people use most of our business, or like a big portion of our business coming from OTAs, for PMs, like, to capture, like, why guests are not booking with us? Maybe that would have worked like 10 years ago when people used to call into our call centers and there was an opportunity to like build a relationship with the people. But if it's an OTA inquiry, like how can we possibly accomplish that?
Anyone in the room want to tackle that? Part of what our job to do is to ensure that you don't become overly leveraged by the OTAs. That's a critical component of revenue management, ensuring that you're appealing to the right guests and you have the right mix of business. So if you're at a point where you're leveraged 70, 80, 85% OTA, you do lose that control. That's why the whole book direct movement was born, is because we have to recapture that control. There are still ways that you can interact with guests that do inquire via OTAs. I mean, those that inquire before they book, and that opportunity to engage via either their secure messaging system is there or through email, or if the guest offers up a phone number to call them, then in that case, you'd have the ability to. But you're right, you're never going to know 100% of your guests' reasons for not booking, but if you can at least know a few of them or a statistical portion of them, that helps you make better guided decisions. So overall, the deeper answer to your question is, if you're overly leveraged by OTAs, let's get that fixed. And let's talk about strategies to increase your direct channel, because that's the most important component to revenue management, is controlling who stays with you and what they are charged. Does that answer your question?
Sort of.
Sort of. We can connect afterwards, too. Anybody else? Calm down.
So that was already a great sales leap for you, Jack.
Oh, thank you.
And I'm sure there's plenty more, but talking about direct bookings versus indirect in the American market is pretty challenging, right?
It is.
And to move that needle, it's a huge challenge. One thing that I want to touch on is data quality. When you speak to your customers, I would like to squeeze out some pain points and hear from you. What are your biggest challenges working with your customers in terms of data and the quality, and is it available, and how good is the industry today, and what do we need to do better?
Well, for me, for working with our clients for data quality, we pull data directly from the API. We work with LSI, we have products that work with the guest data. So we do a lot of marketing to your guests that are there and your past guests, which is absolutely a problem when it comes from an OTA and there's not an email address, sometimes there's not the rate. Europe is dealing with this, I mean, on a real strong basis. where it comes into the property management system and there's no information on that guest. You don't even know how much they paid on the OTA. So we're actually doing some strategies. We were in Europe last week, and we're talking about some ways that we can actually capture data from that guest. As far as quality, we pull directly from the property management system. We don't do self-reporting, and we don't do scrape data. So our quality is excellent. The greatest challenge we have is having clients to pay attention to the data. You know, we're here and we can show them, here's what it is and here's what you have to do, but then they have to go back into their property management system and make changes, and those aren't always easy to do. Even with, you know, we're talking about that policy for the 7.1 versus the 7.4 average stay. Doing a policy that increases that, it changes your housekeeping, it changes all different pieces of it. So that would be my greatest challenge.
How is it for you, Jack? I mean, you showed that you're taking offline numbers into your equation as well, but you know, sometimes it would be very hard to even determine that in terms of calls, having tracking tools that you can look on your conversion, what is coming in offline versus online. And really, I think you saved the CMO's job with that chart, right? And he probably needed it for a board meeting and said, it's actually not that bad, because everybody says it's a waste of time investing money into Google, right? So how is it for you in terms of quality of really aggregating that market data, that marketing data, and this transactional data?
Thank you. I think that the big thing that we focus on at NAVIS is the human coefficient to what it takes to make a reservation, because a booking that comes through online, that's just data that comes through from the guests themselves, and it comes through into your PMS database, and off you go with your CRM. But every single interaction where you have an agent that's actually capturing that data and is required by their job description to actually keep it for you and keep it in a fashion that you can use it. Once you introduce the human into the equation, that's where everything kind of goes to hell, because their human error is a thing. But more importantly than that, the way you get ahead of that, or maybe incentivize your agents to capture better data, is truly actually incentivize them on it. We have a client that shall remain nameless for a time. They were focusing on increasing their marketing, email marketing database, because they lost quite a lot of it when the GDPR laws kicked in last year. And so for 2 months straight, they offered a cash dollar to every single email address that an agent captured over the course of a day for 2 months straight. If you can get that guest email address, meaning the guest that did not book, when you have them and are engaging with them, you get $1. And now that agent is incentivized to go above and beyond to try to capture more salient, actionable data. And then, of course, all your job is to ensure that they're, you know, it's jacksnewkirk@gmail.com and not .co or whatever it would be. That's the human element. But actually incentivizing your agents to work well, capture more data, and be really precise about the data entry is the most critical bit. So to that point, drop-down lists are way better than free-form entry if you can program your demand tracking sheet with drop-downs instead of free-form.
So collecting data is one, then putting it to use is another, right? I had the pleasure to do a large market study for a private equity firm in the UK about the US market, right? And one thing that I was missing during my research is who is doing CRM and using their data accordingly to actually drive repeat rates. We always talk about new bookings, we talk about online marketing spend and everything else, but ultimately the cheapest customer is the one who comes back, right? And I really, and you and you just compared to Europe as well, and we see still, you know, the average direct booking in Europe is still around 40 to 50%, 40% direct, 60% third party. In the US, it'd be more 80-20 or even less. So there needs to be more initiatives, and direct booking is one, obviously. But you need to do something with that data. And it seems that the adoption of CRM technology is extremely low. Why is that, and is that going to change?
Why is the adoption of CRM technology? You mean by the property manager? It's putting data in. You know, I'm telling you, when you add systems, you have to be prepared for the length of time it takes to implement those and make them happen. I think cost prohibition is one, but I think the other is physically having to do it. And you have to have a team that's going to be doing that. So
Can I be provocative and say it's just because of laziness and the OTAs deliver traffic?
We could say that, yeah. We could say that, and it's truth. But it's actually, there's more to it. If you saw the benefit at the end of the street, down the road, you would do it. The thing about it is we are so busy. I say we. My family's in property management, so I really do relate to you as property managers. We're so busy doing our specific job, unless we see something that's going to actually save us time, or really make us money, we have an aversion to doing it. It's the new cool lollipop, but still, for CRMs, that's a lot of upfront investment.
Well, NAVIS is a CRM company, so here we go. So there's two gold mines that most property managers sit on that they have difficulty mining. The first one is your past guest. Your lowest hanging fruit is your guest who's already stayed with you and who has checked out but has not yet made a future booking. That relationship that you manage with those guests who've chosen you, they gave you the rose, and they went on that first date with you, they need to come back for that second date. And being able to automate that process of reaching out to your past guests and making sure that the messaging going to them is timely, relevant, and appropriate to how they like to travel is critical. That's gold mine number one, your past guests. Gold mine number two, those are your leads. Those folks who inquire but have not yet made the decision to book. And we've all had that conversation on the phone where you're on the phone with Mrs. Jones. You say, Mrs. Jones, it's going to be $1,800 for this reservation. And she says, great, I need to talk with my partner first. And so then she hangs up the phone and she doesn't talk to her partner. She talks to your competitor next. They're still in the wind shopping. As long as you have data on that, call it 70% of inquiries that have not yet booked, that's the second gold mine, but you have to begin capturing it. And there's no way to do it conclusively and to remarket to them if you don't have a CRM.
Can I add one more thing to that? The power that we're talking about with marketing to your past guests, it really is the most valuable data in your database. We have people that have made 1.8 million net in doing this specific type of data marketing. What they do is they go in, they look at availability and where they have holes and the type of home that's in. And then they'll go in and they'll look in their database to see who stayed in that type of home with that type of amenity, who hasn't stayed there this year. I preach this every day to my clients. And some of them do it and they make a heck of a lot of money at it. But going and looking and doing that little niche, it may be only 46 of your past people that haven't stayed with you that stayed in that type of home. But those 46 are the most qualified leads you'll ever find. You won't find that kind of information anywhere else. You know your clients better than Amazon knows theirs, and we don't take advantage of it. So I'm going to preach to the choir there.
Wonderful closing word coming from smoke and mirrors all the way back to the gold mine. Thank you, Jack. Thank you, Lynell.
Thanks.